This video is now in session, and Val Demings has not announced yet, not officially announced, but she is going to announce her run for the United States Senate in Florida. So 2022 in Florida, there are going to be two major elections that are happening statewide. The United States Senate election, which currently Marco Rubio, a Republican, holds, and as well as the Florida gubernatorial election, which Ron DeSantis holds. He's also a Republican. So these two races are not expected to be as competitive as a state like Pennsylvania in 2022 or a state like Wisconsin. But it's ultimately a race, though, that Democrats are going to focus on because these are two national profile candidates on the Republican side that Democrats really want to get rid of. They really want to get rid of Marco Rubio, and they really, really want to get rid of Ron DeSantis, and kind of rightfully so for them because Ron DeSantis is becoming a name for the 2024 presidential primary. He's the second choice for Republicans besides Donald Trump, and that means that Democrats are going to want to do as much as possible to remove him from the 2024 Republican primary, and they're going to try every single way possible. If Democrats are able to get Ron DeSantis out of the Florida governor's mansion, then that means he will be almost definitely not running for the presidential primary. He could, but it really spells trouble for his electability, which is why Democrats are salivating at that chance to do so, and that's why they're putting candidates both in the gubernatorial election, but they're also targeting Marco Rubio because Marco Rubio is another name that could potentially spell trouble for Democrats with the Republican primary happening in the 2024 presidential election cycle. But not only that, but Marco Rubio is a kind of Republican that is able to get a coalition together of both Latino voters and as well as white seniors and white voters in general in Florida, and that's not a good thing for Democrats because if they want to win in the future, they're going to need the Latino vote, and if Marco Rubio is getting that vote, then he's essentially robbing the Democrats of their chance to win in Florida. So that's why the Democrats want to get Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis out of Florida. And with Val Demings soon announcing that he's going to be running, at that point, it's further signals that Democrats really want to get rid of both candidates. So Val Demings is currently a representative from Florida's 10th congressional district. That's a congressional district that surrounds Orlando, like the southwest region of Orlando, and she is a particularly notable candidate because she was a potential candidate for the vice presidential position who would accompany Joe Biden in the 2020 election. Obviously, that went to Kamala Harris in the end, but Val Demings was a potential candidate. And the uniqueness that she brings to the table is that she was a former police chief as a black woman. So that's kind of special, especially in these days because of all the police brutalities that have been seen against black Americans. So Val Demings, a police chief, has a unique experience that could captivate a lot of voters and also captivate moderate voters who might think of the BLM movement as a little bit too far to the left. Val Demings is someone who could probably comfort those voters, and there are a lot of those voters in Florida. There are a lot of moderates in Florida and socially conservative individuals in Florida. In terms of social issues, Florida is more conservative than the rest of the United States, and that means that Democrats really have to elect a moderate in order to have, or nominate a moderate in order to have a chance of winning in an election, and that was shown in the 2018 election. In the 2018 election, we had Ron DeSantis for governor, and then we had Andrew Gillum representing the Democratic side. Andrew Gillum was the more progressive candidate, and he was around 30,000 votes away from winning the election. If he had 30,000 votes, he would be in the governor's mansion right now, but since he did not, Ron DeSantis won. And obviously, those margins are razor thin, but imagine if Andrew Gillum was just a little bit more moderate, then it would have definitely gotten enough votes to the point where he would have won the governor's races and would have went to the governor's mansion. So that shows that Florida in this election is both immune to wave years because this is in 2018 a Democratic wave year, but it also shows that Florida is still more of a socially conservative state compared to other states that are trending more towards the left in terms of social issues. So Val Demings is someone who could definitely help with that. Now there are also other somewhat high-profile candidates who are also who will run for the Senate election in Florida. We have Alan Grayson and as well as Stephanie Murray. Both represent a congressional district in Florida, so they're pretty high profile. All three of these candidates are relatively moderate. But judging by this race, even though in terms of Val Demings winning, she could win. There's a possibility. Obviously, there's a possibility with everything, but here there is a possibility. It's just not at that 50% mark, though, a 50-50 chance, and that's because of the past elections we've seen of Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio was first elected in 2010 with the Tea Party movement gaining a lot of seats in the Senate and in the House. And you can see here that Marco Rubio did not win by a majority. He only won by plurality, 48.9% of the vote. And he was elected partially because of Charlie Crist, an independent who we will mention later in this video when we shift over to the governor's elections. So Charlie Crist ran as an independent. He originally ran against Marco Rubio in the Republican primary, but he dropped out and switched to an independent party because he didn't like the direction the Republican Party was going. So he said that he was the center candidate, that he was the candidate to attract all types of voters in the center, while Marco Rubio was a Tea Party Republican. But obviously that message didn't really go out well since he didn't coordinate well with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was running at the same time Charlie Crist was running, and as a result, they split their votes. So Democrats got 20.2% of the vote, while Charlie Crist got 29.7% of the vote. Now, if you add those two together, assume there may be a few votes that go from Charlie Crist to Marco Rubio instead of Kendrick Meek, but overall, if we do add these two votes together, then that would be more than Marco Rubio, and we could see Kendrick Meek or Charlie Crist as the U.S. Senator, but obviously they split their vote, so Marco Rubio won in 2010, so he was lucky in that election. In 2016, he had the benefit of the incumbency. He was the incumbent senator, and as a result, he won by a majority, around 52% against Patrick Murphy, a conservative Democrat, and that will most likely continue in 2022. Democrats are simply at a point where they have been flanked by Republicans in Florida for so long to the point where they're really not at their game when it comes to political elections. And 2022, while there are a lot of Republican candidates that Democrats can try to topple down, it's essentially at this point, though, too early for Democrats to start winning again in Florida elections, just because in 2020 they did so badly in the Florida elections. They lost 2 House seats, and it was one of the only states where Donald Trump actually made gains in the state in terms of percentage. Now, Florida went for Trump between 2016 and 2020 by at least an additional 1 to 1.5%, and that is big for Florida. For a Republican hasn't won Florida by that high of a margin since George Bush in 2004. And ever since 2008, Florida has become more and more Republican. You can see in presidential elections where Barack Obama won Florida by a lean margin, but in the 2012 election, it went to a tilt margin, and then 2016, it went to a tilt margin for Trump, and now it's at a lean margin. So that is that's essentially what has been happening in Florida, and that is the same thing that will probably be reflected in the 2022 gubernatorial election. In this election, Ron DeSantis will almost definitely win out the Republican primary, and if so, then he will go against the Democratic challenger. And here, this is where Charlie Crist is running. Charlie Crist declared that he would run as a Democrat for the Florida gubernatorial election. And Charlie Crist, by the way, he used to be a governor of Florida. So given some context to this, because Charlie Crist is an incredibly complex character, but he's practically ran for every statewide race possible in Florida. So he was the Florida Attorney General, and then he became the governor of Florida between 2007 and 2011 before he was succeeded by Rick Scott, and then he ran as a Democrat in 2016 for Florida's 13th congressional district. So he was originally a Republican until 2010. From 2010 to 2012, he switched to an independent, and then from 2012 onwards, he became a Democrat. And that is essentially his political story. Now he wants to run for the Florida governor again as a Democrat. And then we also have other people who are running, but the most notable challenger to Charlie Crist will be Nikki Fried. Now, Nikki Fried currently is the Florida Commissioner of Agriculture, and that might not seem like an important job, other than the fact that Florida does have a lot of agriculture, and as a result, Florida's Commissioner of Agriculture does control a lot. But it's interesting, though, because it's the only statewide race Democrats have won in for the past 2 years. If we look at every other statewide election, U.S. Senate, U.S. governor's position, if we look at the Attorney General position, all have gone for Republicans in 2018 and in 2020. Ron DeSantis won governorship. U.S. Senate, Rick Scott, Republican, won. If we see here, if we see Attorney General, Republican, won. So you can see that all of these statewide races have been won by Republicans. The only exception, though, is Nikki Fried as Agriculture Commissioner. Every other race besides the Agriculture Commissioner has been won by Republicans, but Nikki Fried as a Democrat won this race. So as a result, she has cemented herself as a person who is electable. Even though it's not a particularly high position of power in Florida, ultimately she won a statewide race where Democrats could not, and thus that gives her a real platform against Charlie Crist. Now, whoever wins out this race will go against Ron DeSantis, and that is a formidable challenge because Ron DeSantis is pretty highly approved of in Florida. He has high approval ratings, and he handled the COVID-19 pandemic. His COVID-19 handling is contentious, but ultimately Floridians didn't mind his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. And if we see through hypothetical pollings, we can see that Ron DeSantis won here. This is a Data for Progress poll, so it's a Democratic pollster. But you can see here these are also Republican pollsters, but nonetheless Ron DeSantis is winning in there. And then we can, and overall through approval ratings by nonpartisan pollsters, he has gotten around a majority, further than a majority, 57% of an approval rating, similar to Phil Murphy in New Jersey. So it's something that is, it's something that's hard to beat in 2022 for Democrats. But obviously through this race, they're running high-profile candidates, as they should be doing. Even though they're high-profile and they're more likely to lose than win, ultimately it's similar to Georgia, where Democrats have to fight in every single election and have to put up good candidates in every single election for the voter constituents to actually consider the Democratic Party. So if they elect Charlie Crist, if they elect Val Demings, if they elect Nikki Fried, or nominate, Charlie Crist, Val Demings, or Nikki Fried, then that will represent a step forward for the Florida Democratic Party by nominating more recognizable candidates and more moderate candidates that will help them actually get back into power. Obviously, Marco Rubio, Ron DeSantis, they're more likely to win still, but ultimately it's good for Democrats to start from from this kind of point and build back on. And we'll see as the race progresses if this race will get competitive or if Democrats will still continue to be plagued by their problems of voter registration and getting the vote out. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.